Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the side event. In the first, anyone need the translation? We have the translation to Arabic and to English. Okay. Again, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the side event. I'm Yusuf Moayed. I'm member of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building. This is the committee working under the UNFCCC. It is the important and great opportunity for meet with you. I would say welcome to this the regional thematic dialogue. This is a dialogue. This is a dialogue organized with Corporation NAB Global Network. About the PCCB, PCCB was established in the COP21 in Paris for address about this is the gaps in the capacity building for especially in the developing country, and this is the committee focus about the enhanced efforts for capacity for implementing the activities of the convention. And this year, the PCCB focus about this the important issue about the capacity building for the support the adaptation through addressing the gaps and needs related implementing the national adaptation plan. For that, this is our dialogue today about the building capacity for NAB implementation strategies. Today, our work and our plan serves the important challenges because the impacts of climate change and the scaling up the challenges because of the impact of climate change. For that, we very interested about this the national adaptation plan. How can the adaptation for this is the impact of climate change, especially in the developing country? How can for support, how can for the protection, our societies, our ecosystem, our economy, for support, this is the important challenges. For that, we need the effective adoption for planning, strategy, and the most collective commitment strengthening the capacity of national to implementation NAB. This is our dialogue today, the second dialogue. The PCCB will focus about organize the fourth dialogue in 4 weeks for climate in the Africa and the Asia Pacific and the Latinian and the MENA. During 1 hour, we have this is the discussion with this our expert and the professionals and them interested about the NABs, and then we will share with us the experience, acknowledgement about how can development our capacity building about implementing national adaptation plan. Please let me to say the welcome to our panelists today. Mr. Shafiq Masoud, the policy advisor, NAB Global Network, by virtually with us. Ms. Naima Osama, Director Climate Change Adaptation Lead. Ms. Teresa Wong from the FAO. Ms. Rola Mishdelani, Specialist in the ICARDA, welcome. And Mr. Walid Nadam from the IFAD. Welcome. And this is a great opportunity for discuss with you about this, our challenges about the capacity building in our region and the MENA region for that. Now we will start about this, the first questions. The first questions to Ms. Rola and Ms. Teresa and Ms. Naima. When we say about this, the NAB is the concept, is the one of this, the most important, the mechanism for adaptation to climate change on the national level. This is our questions. This is the question in the 3 minutes about what are the key capacity needs and gaps faces the countries in the MENA region to implementing their adaptation strategy and plans. Ms. Rola.
Thank you, Yusuf. Good afternoon, colleagues. I first of all, let me say that there's so much to be said about capacity building, because as much as there are all programs talk about capacity building, uh, there is a lot to be said about how do we improve the quality of capacity building, how do we better integrate it into the process, and how do we use it as a vehicle to integrate the different processes under climate change. We know that there are capacity building programs under the NDC, the NAP, so many different areas, and we really need to be mindful to what extent there is that transfer of knowledge, there is an improved capacity to deliver on the national action plan, national adaptation plans, and there is a need for bringing more coherence. Unfortunately, and I'm sure many people who have worked at the local level, at national level, know that often these reports are prepared by consultants with very little consultation that happens. And I think there has to be a mechanism, a good mechanism that brings along the different people that you need to consult, especially on a subject as complex as adaptation. It's a multi-stakeholder process. It's a multi-sector process, and there is really a need for bringing more coherence across the sector. And therefore, on a NAPS initiative, you really need to bring that mechanism for people to talk together, for stakeholders to talk together, and particularly when you're dealing with stakeholders that are not at the same level technically, from their own comfort, having to get out of their comfort zone, and who need to be, who are at different even from different social cultural background. There are the vulnerable groups that you need to bring in. So you really need to be thinking of a mechanism that can level the playing field and that can bring all these different groups together for that. So this is one area where it is needed. There is a need also for bringing more, when we speak about the policy, the science policy interface. There's so much knowledge to be captured. I think in what we have seen from yesterday and today, there is a lot of knowledge in this region about adaptation, but it needs to be harnessed well and linked up together well. There is a need for looking better at evidence. This is one area where many people know a lot about adaptation, but you really need to have the evidence, the metrics, the indicators, the proper indicators in place, and especially when you want to push the agenda for a global goal on adaptation, and this is very important. And then finally, I want to highlight the importance of linking, availing more finance for building capacity. I think it's capacity building programs end up being a small extension of bigger program, and you really need to have the capacity building starting at a very early stage, from the planning, from the development of the concept, planning, monitoring, evaluation, implementation, and you really need to have that with good resources. And one last point, because you remember, Yusuf, working with the negotiators. Yes. It was very important to bring the people who are going to implement. Yes. And usually it's with these capacity building initiative, people come in who are not directly related, and bringing in the senior with junior people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rola, and now Ms. Teresa, especially what is the vision about the FAO and the working about this is the capacity building. We believe it's the capacity building. This is a cross-cutting issues about implementing the national adaptation plans in the country, especially in our region. Yes.
Thank you. I've worked on NAPs for about 10 years, and I've been in the region for the last few. I think this is a challenging region for NAPs as well. What I've seen is also that in the first place, there's not a lot of NAPs in the region. It came out of a Cancun decision in 2012, supporting developing countries. But I think that and extremely useful guidance coming out of the UNFCCC and all the work around it. I think in the region, firstly, we have a sort of not a lack of uptake of national adaptation plans in the first place. There's not a lot of processes around a NAP. I mean, and we are also a region that is a mix of LDCs and middle income countries, right? And I think a lot of the targeted support has been to LDCs. And maybe missing out that middle. And so this is our region. That's the reality of our region. And I think when you have that, maybe lower awareness of NAPs and the value of the process, because after all, it's not a report. It's not something that you upload on the UNFCCC website and done with it. I mean, it's supposed to start a process of stakeholder coordination and of sustained coordination, bringing together many different subsectors that are important to looking at adaptation priorities. And you're right, it's sectoral. It's not something that can stay as a high level process, right? The purpose of a NAP process is to bring in these stakeholders. But I think we do need to see a bit more commitment from countries to begin or to initiate and to sustain a NAP process. I think it's still a very useful process, even though that support has been differently targeted. From working with a variety of countries in Africa and also Asia Pacific, you really do see that when people are forced to come together in a way and to to do prioritization and to go through all that kind of systematic steps of planning, you also get surprised of what people can do when they come together. So I think I'd like to see more of this in the region. And I think coming from the FAO perspective, and we've worked together with the key UN organizations that have supported sort of NAP uptake since 2012 with UNDP, especially on the the NAP for the integrating NAPs in agriculture and NAP, so the NAP Ag project. And so we've been sort of part of this conversation, and we see that it's very useful. So from the FAO perspective, I think there was also a need to bring in the subsectors quite soon into this. It can't, I think. Working with a lot of agricultural sector actors, I find that there is definitely a big gap in understanding adaptation, understanding why it's important to plan. A lot of people assume that what you're doing now to address water scarcity or drought resistant agriculture or conservation agriculture, all these naturally lead to adaptation. But I think that you need to do that systematic process of prioritization. You need to understand and assess, one action versus another. Those kinds of valuable tools that the NAP process allows us to do, they are missing in certain sectors. And that's why FAO is really trying, as part of its work, to bring the agricultural sector into the conversation, because it is a highly exposed sector to climate change. And a lot of work needs to be very deep in there. There's a lot of dedicated work to be done in that sector in order for them to be capacitated to be in that bigger conversation on NAPs. So I think that's what we're trying to do also with other agencies, and there's just a lot more work to be done. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Now, Ms. Naima from Morocco, please explain to us what is the priorities in the Morocco about the systemic gaps, about needs, for implementing the National Adaptation Plan in Morocco.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's a difficult question because we are somewhere. We implemented several things, but I must say that we need to do more. With regards for Morocco, for instance, we have several limitations, but for instance, partly limitation because we have in terms, for instance, of coordination. limitations in the availability and accessibility of data. For instance, in terms of involving the stakeholders, including the private sector and the civil society. But for Morocco, the major issues, I must say, I may share two. We engaged in our NAP very early, but until today we have not developed a successful system to monitor and to evaluate our NAP. We cannot evaluate or assess the adaptation actions that are implemented. This is one difficulty. I'm sorry for my voice.
Okay.
And a second challenge or barrier is the weak vertical integration. As we all know, adaptation is happening at the local level, and we don't have clear articulation between the adaptation planning at the local level and the adaptation planning at the national level. In other words, adaptation at local level doesn't inform so far adaptation at the national level. So those are two major issues. And in terms of capacity buildings, we for instance for the MNE, we are working on developing a sort of system which will be incorporated within what exists already. So we opted for a system that is installed in regions and is managed by observatories, regional observatories. But the issue with this system and the systems are monitoring and keeping track of the state of the environment in territories or at the subnational levels. And we opted to incorporate a climate change module with an adaptation component. But as you mentioned, we had to do that. We worked through a participatory approach to identify indicators with the local government staff and the local stakeholders. But the issue is that this the methodology or the indicators we selected are related to parameters that inform about the vulnerability, and that was according to the fourth methodology of the IPCC report, assessment report. And this is very complicated. Yeah. So the local staff would not appropriate the methodology, and we did not move with our system. So this is an area of capacity building. For integral, for vertical integration, we need to tailor workshops that will be targeted to specific stakeholders. For instance, we need to build capacities of government staff on the techniques, something coming up from the IPCC, but that should be very simple to be used and owned by actors at the local level. We need to work on coordination. I mean, to bring together all stakeholders and to see how we can we can build their capacities so as they will be able to design and implement adaptation actions.
Thank you, Ms. Naim. Especially you focus about this the important issue about this is the capacity building for this the NGOs, for youth, for I believe in our region, we must also focus about the capacity building, not in the government institution. We need this the more capacity building in the NGOs, youth, also private sector. For that, we this is the one of the important gaps to be honest in our region about how can prepare this is the new plans for more engagement and capacity building. For capacity building, this the private sector, NGOs, and youth activists for participate in the national adaptation plan. Thank you for this the first question. Now we have the second questions to Dr. Walid and Dr. Shafir. Dr. Walid, how can we build and scale up capacity in the formulation and implementation of national adaptation plan to address the main needs and gaps in the region?
Thank you, Yusuf. Good evening, everyone. So basically, I would like to tweak the question a bit on what are the incentives for people to work on the NAPs or to build their capacities, or for institutions to build their capacity for NAP. There should be an incentive for that. In our world now, we are looking for action, for implementation. So basically, I believe that if NAP would lead to an investment, then this would be the main incentive for organizations to support the government, and for the government to give priority for the NAP, and then for the individuals to build their capacity. So IFAD approach is basically to start up with discussions at the local level in the communities and with the government on their NAP, if the NAP exists. If the NAP doesn't exist, with the climate change general strategies or any strategies or policies or assessments available at the country level. And then try to extract from these NAPs investment projects. What we see most often in the NAP, they have a very good analysis of the climate assessment, vulnerability, the trends, and then they may define some priority sectors with some impacts. Most of them stop there. Then very few would go this further step where they identify investment projects and the actual needs and create a business case for investment. If the NAP reaches this level, then it will be attractive for everyone to actually work on the NAP and invest. I would give an example so that my discussion becomes more tangible. In Egypt, for example, their main priority for the government, one of their main priorities was to link up water, energy, and food. And they created the nexus of food, water, energy. And they said, this is our priority for the coming era. And we want our development partners to support this. They selected IFAD to lead on the food pillar. And IFAD brought together the main development partners for Egypt. And we designed an investment program of $3.4 billion for Egypt. And the base of that was the climate strategy of Egypt, where it defined the main priorities for food security, which is the agriculture sector. And the main issues in the agriculture sector in Egypt is water and soil and availability of land for agriculture. And the analysis made under the climate change strategy and the priorities were put into this investment program with very defined 3 big programs that are now being funded by several donors, with the first stage reaching 1.7 billion for the coming 10 years. So when people perceive this as a good investment, the NAP and the climate change strategy is a base for all this big investment program, then the capacity will either be there partially, and then it can be strengthened, and all the partners will be willing to invest in this because they will see that this is coming to a return on investment which is extremely high, and it's putting the climate change, environment, agricultural sector as a main priority for the national government and for the cooperation partners. So I believe, in brief, that building this business case, putting the core of the main adaptation needs as a way, build a rationale for adaptation in an investment panel, in a return on investment with an actual, give it a dollar sign that this is how much we invest, this is how much we may profit for the future, in addition to environmental sustainability and food security.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Walid. I believe this is a good link between the profit and investment, and how can this the important link for capacity building and the adaptation. Now, Dr. Shafiq,
Yeah, thank
please,
you.
floor to yours.
Can everyone hear me? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, so thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here on this forum. So Yusuf, with regard to your question on how we build and scale up capacities, there are a few examples that I can share as suggestions. First of all, we need to avoid general or one-off training opportunities. By that, what I mean is that we need to provide, as part of a broader capacity development strategy, focus on demand-driven and need-based trainings on a sustained basis. This should be combined with other capacity building strategies, sort of including peer learning, mentoring, reflective learning practices. We should also provide role-specific trainings to individuals rather than generalized training group trainings. Another suggestion would be to avoid language barriers. So that would include provide more opportunities for capacity building in languages other than English. And then finally, to avoid reliance on short-term consultants. And what we can do here is that use consultants more strategically, for example, as embedded advisors or through longer-term assignments to support NAP teams. Build capacities of local and national experts rather than relying on international consultants. Invest in government systems and structures by building both individual and institutional capacities, and also leveraging expertise available in government, but in government ministries or organizations that are outside the government, including research and educational institutions. So these are some of the examples that we can adapt, suggestions that we can adapt to help build capacities in app implementation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Shafaq. Thank you for this interventions. Now the third questions. When we're talking about this is the NAP, we're talking about the monitoring, evaluation, learning process. This is a very, very important tracking for this progress about how can the progress by this process in the National Adaptation Plan. My questions to Dr. Walid and Dr. Shafaq also, how can this process, I'm talking about this, the monitoring and evaluation for support the effective implementation of NAPs in the MENA region? Dr. Walid.
Thank you, Yusuf. I think for monitoring and evaluation, it's a task that it may not be very interesting for some people to do. So the first step is to have very well defined indicators and KPIs in the NAP. And this goes back to my first intervention, that is the NAP actually related to actual activities that can be measured, to actual investment programs that can be measured. If this is the case, then the M&E will be much easier to monitor and implement. And usually, again, as an example of what we do, if the NAP is a base for the actual investment projects in the country that have a substantive budget, then the monitoring, evaluation, and learning and knowledge management will be budgeted. And this is the first step to ensure that someone will be doing this activity. Then the investment programs, which have a big budget, usually they have a strong monitoring and evaluation system with actual value measures that need to be reported on and monitored throughout the lifetime of the investment program. So the actual implementation units or the ministries implementing these investment programs will monitor the progress of these programs. And since they are linked to the NAP, automatically they will show us how much the NAP is actually progressing or not. In IFAD projects, there's always an impact evaluation at the end of the project. And this is composed of two parts. The first part is very technical to assess the actual progress made on natural resources management or actual agricultural crops production. And the other part is socioeconomic on the beneficiaries. One example related to the NAP is a project in Rwanda where the perception was that the decreased coffee production was related to the drought in the country. After several years of implementation of projects related to coffee and after doing the impact assessment, it turned out that the heavy rain is the real cause of the decrease in coffee production and not the drought. Whereas the adaptation measures made was against the drought, not against the heavy rains. So this part of when you have an actual project doing these parts, assessments and evaluations, this would inform the NAP, and the second NAP will be much better informed on what are the adaptation practices, how much funding they need, and how you can progress better. So again, the message is linking the NAP to actual investments, and then you will have all the resources to do good monitoring and evaluation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Walid. Dr. Shafaq, the floor is yours.
So monitoring systems obviously are critical for NAP. They, as we all understand, they provide it's an approach that monitor progress, evaluates results, and learn to ensure climate change adaptation strategies. Over half of the African NAP documents submitted to the UN includes MEL framework, or the need to establish MEL framework. So MEL fosters transparency and trust build between different actors, and it promotes mutual accountability, both top-down and bottom-up. So by creating spaces and facilitating dialogue with different stakeholders to engage in the collection, analysis, and sense-making of evidence is an essential component to have an effective, robust MEL. Integrating MEL as part of NAP processes means that countries can continuously improve and adapt their climate change adaptation strategies to ensure their effectiveness and equity. And there are many opportunities for different actors to engage in MEL throughout the NAP process. And NAP teams should be grounded in participatory consultations, including vulnerability and marginalized social groups. We have to, I think, keep in mind that MEL frameworks cannot be established in one go. It's a learning by doing process. So you can start small, and you can start by establishing systems that already are based on data that exist and adaptation indicators that are already being collected. So these are very effective mechanisms to have a MEL system that is more robust. Another thing is, I think countries that do progress reporting is an essential component, because progress reporting also helps to feed into MEL processes, and it also helps to track the implementation of NAP and identifies area which requires improvement. So these are some components that we can adapt to have more robust MEL systems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shafaq. Yes, I agree with you and with Dr. Walid about this is the important issue about the monitoring evaluation. I believe the countries dependent on this the MRV system for follow-up the implementation of National Adaptation Plan. And now we have the first questions. When we're talking about the context strategy of NAP, we must inclusions about the vulnerable groups, such as the women, indigenous people, youth, children. It is the factual, but maybe this social situation, maybe the DM capacity for the contribution and the for implementing National Adaptation Plan. My question is what the capacity building measures can be adopted to encourage we're talking about the vulnerable groups for engagement with ensuring equal and voluntary contribution to the NAP implementation process. Ms. Fula.
Well, as I said in the beginning, usually when you bring in consultations with the stakeholders or a capacity building exercise, you don't always have people at the same level, yes, at the same technical level, at the same maturity level, or even confidence level. And this is what happens with vulnerable group. When they are in the room, you're happy that you have a head count of somebody representing women and somebody representing the youth and somebody representing, a head count, and you say you've done your job. But these people end up sitting in the back, not talking, and really not engaged in the process. And I think, as someone, and maybe Teresa or Naima were saying, it's a time process. It takes time to build trust. It takes time to have to bring them to feel confident to participate. As Shafak was saying, language is very important. You really need to, when you bring in a plan, it needs to be used in simple language, in using examples from day-to-day life. If you talk about the impact of climate on in 2000 scenario, the extreme weather scenario, the extreme case scenario, and the temperature is going to rise by 4 or 5 degrees. Some people, especially vulnerable groups who are, they might not be able to relate to a scientific process as much as asking them, how is this affecting them? How is this impacting them in their day-to-day life? How does it increasing their cost? Are they losing their jobs as a result of it in the agriculture sector, for example? Are they having less income to bring home because of these extreme events? How much it's costing them to have protective measures, etc. So you really need to bring in a language that speaks to the day-to-day concerns. You need to be thinking of building their confidence, and sometimes, especially in our region, sometimes they might be afraid to speak up. And they might think there is a government plot to just take for security measures. So there is the need for building trust, for encouraging, for facilitating these processes, linking consultation in different forms. You might have to do different focused group discussions with one-on-one consultation, with consultation of groups of the same, let's say women on their own, or young people on their own, and then mix and match in multi-stakeholders. So there are different techniques to be used in that process. There is the need for, as I said, the culture, the language to be used. Maybe using also the digital technology. You might have people in remote areas, sending them the messages, getting if they are linked online, not always. But you can digital technology also can help you, using mechanisms that show examples, as I said, that can even role plays. There are different techniques that one needs to use in combination to bring in these vulnerable groups.
Thank you. Teresa, what is the vision about FAO when we're implementing any program, about the focus about the fragiles or the vulnerable groups in the region?
Thank you. As Rula said, it's already about time that we move beyond representation. It's not enough to do a head count in the room to see how many women are there and then check the box. Because I think when you talk about NAP implementation, and then when you dive down into the sectors for implementation, like agriculture, you're looking at the activities that are required for communities to transform agriculture into more adaptable, resilient forms. And when you do that, and if you don't include youth and women, it's just not viable. I mean, we're in the agricultural sectors everywhere in the world are facing this massive depopulation of youth from the sector. It's a sector that is being threatened by, young people moving to cities, no longer finding this a viable activity anymore, income generation, losing livelihoods. If you don't include youth in your solutions, you will continue to see this process play out. And women are also, critical. I think you need, for example, we're seeing in FAO projects in the region. Sorry, there's a bit of an echo. I think in the region there are a couple of women have been involved in quite a few opportunities. We have farmer field schools, for example, and we have some in certain countries, women taking leadership in farmer field schools where there's a particular household that's chosen to do a demonstration or a pilot of maybe a climate smart agricultural technique, and then sort of disseminating that to the community and seeing how that you can do that in a proven way. We have Water Users Association, because water scarcity is a big issue here for agriculture. Agriculture uses about 80% of water. Water Users Association, which also sort of helps to download the techniques and the mechanisms for water saving, water efficiency, sustainability. Those we have seen in certain areas, and also I think in Egypt, some of these are also led by women. And I think when you have women as custodians of some of these solutions, as also custodians of data, I think in Iraq we're trying to implement projects where we have women also are taking the lead on climate information and climate information services. We need to integrate them and this is the heart of gender responsiveness. It's so hard to implement. There's a lot of things written about gender responsiveness, but then you need to get into the activities, the where it's being implemented, and ask yourself very difficult and deep questions on what it means to have women involved in these, and also for youth. So I think it makes a lot of sense in the agricultural sectors to think about these issues, and yeah, I think that's where the potential lies, is in implementation.
Okay, thank you. About in Morocco, what this is the procedure, what is the priorities for focus about this, the fragile or the vulnerable groups, and implementing the national NAPs or any strategy deal with the adaptation in Morocco?
Thank you for the question. I can share my humble experience with those with this category of actors. I find them not demanding. We start by visiting them, but when you visit them, they appreciate it, and they appreciate our interest and our efforts, and we work with them through some workshops to raise their awareness and their understanding about the climate change impacts. We started also working with them to evaluate their vulnerability through vulnerability reduction assessment, and we do this through bringing to them. I like your idea when you bring people to them. You need to bring to build trust with them. We try to bring to the table the representatives from the territorial collectivity, which is the smallest administrative structure, and those are elected people. So they should be they should trust each other. And also we bring staff from line ministries, from sectors that are of interest for them. For instance, forest, biodiversity, water, agriculture. And what we did also in first stages, we worked to build their expertise on how to develop grants, how to write grants, how to prepare reportings. We also brought to them some donors, some small grant donors, to show them that they might have this possibility to get funding to implement their adaptation actions. And with regard to their involvement in our NAP, through their actions they implemented through their small capacity, small community-based adaptations, we try to explain to them their role, and we try to explain to them that they might contribute to the some objectives identified in the national contribution, the CDN, the NDC. For instance, in terms of areas restored and areas that was extended to agriculture. In terms of money, we are preparing the ground for them to be involved in the ongoing monitoring and evaluation system. And we are trying to have them reflect on indicators, how to, we shared with them some indicators on which they might work, and those indicators are might be aggregated and might inform the national objective. And I find working with these communities very rewarding, because when they own this, because when they see their interest, when they are satisfied, they are willing to do more. And they are volunteering. When they are volunteering with their shelters, with feeding visitors, feeding workers. So I see this as first steps on how to involve them in our NAP.
Okay.
I hope this will be successful in the
Thank you.
future.
Thank you. Now we have thank you for this like great intervention about this the questions. Now we have only 10 minutes for this is the complete this side event. If any question intervention from the audience. Yes.
Dr. Mohammed, Director of Engineering Association for Development and Environment in Iraq, local NGO. I would like to ask Dr. Yusuf, as you are a good staff in Environmental Ministry of Iraq, what are the on-ground Iraqi government plans to engage the local NGOs in the programs of capacity building for according to the NAP strategy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. This is what about I am now the member of PCCB, but I the brief answer to you now in the Iraq. Now we have the final step for complete the national adaptation plan with their own environment. This is the this NAB or this the plan when included this is the chapter there with capacity building, and one is the first priority is the private sector and NGOs and the others. For that, of course, we will focus after this complete. This is the document, and next year we will focus about the capacity building for more engagement about the NGOs in the climate action. Generally, with focus about this adaptation. Okay. Any questions? Yes, yes, please.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Tarek. I'm from UNICEF, Division Office in Amman. And so you spoke a lot about inclusion and consultation. And of course, from UNICEF, I was just wondering if it's possible to actually, or how to do to actually involve children within this consultation process. Would that be something which could be feasible? And if so, how would you recommend to do it? So I guess that question is for you, madam. And perhaps to, yeah, thank you.
Yes, definitely. I think children should be part of talking about an inclusive process, but you really need to design it properly for children. I think that children nowadays are getting older very fast, and they are they have acquired much more knowledge, as much more than previous generations. But I think that there are good programs. You would be able to tell me more about the good programs for involving children. Having them, as we talked, I think that you don't want to have something that is just folkloric for the show. You bring in a group of experts and you put in children and you're saying, I'm doing consultation. There has to be properly designed, properly observed, properly monitored, and to understand their needs really. And there are also you need to be mindful of certain gaps. Children in rural areas, children in poor settlements, they should be taken account of in their needs and their their needs for services, for opportunities in life. So I think that any program, there are no, and you know it, there are no one program fits it all. You really need to understand the situation, understand the dynamics of a society that you're dealing with. And good that UNICEF, you work a lot on the ground. You cannot use children as one category. There are differences that you have to understand in terms of their needs, in terms of their social situation, the family situation they are coming from. So there is a need to work in terms of understanding, mapping the dynamics, the diversities, and then working on these bases.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rula. Yes, Mr. Rik.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Ajit from ICADA, a climatologist. I had the privilege of working in Iraq and also some other countries into the national adaptation planning. So what in terms of building capacities for NAPS, in addition to what we discussed here, that is bringing together multiple stakeholders and relevant stakeholders, not only the citizens, but also important stakeholders like the private sector and multiple ministries and NGOs and civil societies. That is an important thing, and that was the core of the discussion here. But one important thing I found that is missing is the bringing data sets and evidences to the table, because that is fundamentally the basis of our discussion. So we have to have plans and enabling environments to bring these data sets open, and and also reduce the bureaucracies existing in various ministries, because we can discuss interesting things with the different stakeholders, but it has to be supported by evidence and data sets. So I think if such things are a limitation, and that's what we should fundamentally try to solve also. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ajit, for this important interventions. Any questions? Yes, please.
Hello, Alejandro Kilpatrick with the UNFCCA Secretariat, and we're co-organizers of the event. So thank you very much to our speakers and Yusuf. Just a comment. I think all of you mentioned key issues that we are hearing in the negotiation process when it comes to capacity building, country ownership, institutional capacities, and longer-term approaches. My question is regarding what Rula and Walid said. Walid, you mentioned that if you link an investment program, then with capacity building, that makes it more successful. And Rula, you mentioned also about the coherence in capacity building. That capacity building usually is a small component within a project. So I'm wondering, how do you see the aspect of institutional capacity building fitting into this? Because Walid, what you mentioned, if you link it to an investment program, then you secure the funding for building those capacities. But is that for the purpose of that investment program, or how do you keep it at the institutional level? And maybe if you may have experience, and maybe Rula. Just wanted to just on those 2 points.
Thank you, Alejandro. No, of course, it has to be at the national level, not only for the program itself. But usually what I'm talking about are big investment programs, like multi-million-dollar programs. So it's not like a small project in one area and you need to build on it a national capacity. That would be much harder. But when we are talking about national investment programs at a large scale, and when the ministries engage, usually, and these programs are more than one ministry. Like, again, if I take the example of Egypt, we have the Minister of International Cooperation, Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Irrigation, and Minister of Environment. So already the program is engaging with 4 ministries and at the national level with the overall planning. So if you put just a small percentage of that program for capacity building with these institutions, and then you go at the local level with municipalities or NGOs or community groups, also you build their capacities within their role, then this would, of course, it may not be enough for all the needs, but at least you have something tangible that you can implement at the national level. Even within one program, even when we are designing smaller programs, and another example is this adaptation fund project in Libya, for example. It's a $10 million project. With the current status in Libya, the ministry wanted to have a small component within that project to build their capacities on adaptation to climate change and water management and these issues. So because of the weak institutional structure, a small component within such a program may not be enough, but it would be a good startup in a ministry that is lacking all of these resources.
Yeah, it's by really linking a capacity building initiative or capacity building with institutional change. And for that, you really need the right indicators for that, the right monitoring, ongoing progress. It's not a one-time off and then change, but also I think we have a tendency to think of capacity building as only taking a group of people and training. And this is not capacity building. It goes beyond that. Capacity building is also seeing how institutions change over time and putting the legal structure in place, putting the finance, putting the change. You want to speak about empowering local authorities or municipalities. There has to be a change in looking and understanding how is that institution functioning in that. And then also looking at horizontal linkages. This is also where you need to see better that institutional structure. It's not enough and there are countries in this region, I won't name them now, but you have one ministry that has excellent capacity, and then the other ministries are really suffering from lack of exposure, authority, knowledge, access to information, all these things. You really need to link them horizontally in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for bringing me here as well. My name is Dr. Chaber. Also, somehow I can call a focal point of NAP within the government of Somalia, although I don't use that title. And the reason is that because of the whole implementation and everything goes to the UNDP. And so the issue of capacity building, we have been, as mentioned by her, the issue of capacity building is not just on training the people. It's beyond that. We need to have what we call institutional memory, whereby at least those who we have trained them, who have the capacity, should have to remain there. But the question now here is, if the people who are implementing NAB and the NAB has trained are working with UNDP, and some of them have already moved it to another UN organization, what is the essence of this? Where is the capacity building for the NAB? Where is the institutional memory? How can we, NAB is not something that we are, as now going on in Somalia, it's not something that's now documenting and then throwing it in the shelves. No, it is not. We need something that, as you mentioned, we need to create an innovative projects and that can scale up project in the future. So if we are lacking all these necessary people who are conducting the NAB are not already, if there is no country ownership, how can we talk about the capacity building for the NAB? So these are the realities, and Somalia is a very good example that we actually need to take into considerations, particularly when we are talking about the other countries that are now trying to implement the NAB. There is a series of challenges that NAB is going on. We are expecting to finish on next year, October, but the way it goes on, and we have seriously talked about it together with the UNDP team, and that this is not making sense at all, and it's not reflecting for what the country is actually required. So these are the challenges that we have, and I think unless we solve these challenges, we cannot talk about the capacity building with regard to a national adaptation plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is the important interventions. Now I believe we must know the class. This is a side event. On behalf of my colleague in the BCCB and the Secretariat, I would express my thanks and appreciation for our panelists and participants. Thank you very much for this exchange, experience and knowledge between us about how can this development, our capacity building fund implementation, our NAB and strategy of adaptations. Of course, if we have any commitment or any question, we will share with you the QR for the PCB. We can share with you any comment on it. Also, I would inform you the COP28, we will collect the outputs of the 3 side events in the 3 weeks of the climate and submit it into the global discussion in the COP28. Also, we invite any organization and institution when to access into network of capacity building. We're very interested for this. This is the network, the platform for exchange experience and knowledge between us. Also, I hope and also I invite you for see you in the BCCB for NAB day in the COP28 in the Dubai. Thank you for everyone, and I hope see you in the COP28 in the Dubai. Thank you very much. Thank you.